Hello, bruv. We're back with The Haunted Homestead by Eden Southworth. Return to Chapter 7 in a very fragile 1897 publication. And I don't edit on this channel, so you get what you get. It was a 3 days and 3 nights stage ride from Winchester, where I live with my guardian, to Wolfbreak, the home of the Laguerre. Accordingly, in order to reach my journey's end on Christmas Eve, I set out from home on the 20th of December. And after 3 days and nights of the roughest traveling up hill and down, through the darkest forest, along the banks of the most frightful precipices, across the rudest and most primitive bridges, thrown over the most awful chasms, through mountain streams so deep and rapid that in fording them it was often hard to tell whether we rode or rode. Finally, on the evening of the 24th, I reached Frost Height, where the mules from Wolfbreak, under the charge of Uncle Judah, already awaited me. Although it was getting dusky and the road down the snow-covered mountain path to Wolfbreak was not of the safest description, even by daylight, and might be considered dangerous by a starless night, yet Uncle Judah, with the hard-headedness of a favored old family servant, insisted that I should set forth immediately, as Marse and Miss would be 'specting me to supper. So, mounting my mule, and preceded by the old servant upon his jack, I descended into the outer darkness of the downward mountain path. In a little while it was quite dark, and I could neither see Judah on his jack before me, nor even the narrow path under my feet. At every step I seemed to be plunging down into some dark abyss of shadows, below shadows. I could not guide my course, but trusted to the habits and sure-footedness of the mountain mule that carried me. A glimmering light shining up from the deepest depths of the darkest below indicated the position of Wolfbreak Lodge. There was always a strange mystic interest fell in approaching a place like that, for the first time amid the shadows of night. The undefined, shapeless mass of buildings, the unseen boundaries, the unknown circumstances that await us, all, that's an odd comma, all like some strange mystery pique curiosity. And to these general subjects of interest was added the particular one of the haunting presence of which Mathilde had darkly written. I was yielding imagination up to the fascination of these dreamy speculations, when my mule, having reached the bottom, or else an obstacle of some sort, I could not, in the deep darkness, decide which, stopped short, and I heard, okay, so it just leaves out half a sentence. Stopped short, and I heard a familiar voice say, "Is that you, Uncle Judah? Did Agnes come?" "Yes, honey," relied the old man. Yeah, apparently they had no editor for this library series. "Yes, honey," replied the old man, "and I am here. Where are you, dear Mathilde?" exclaimed I in the same instant. "I am in the carryall. Uncle Judah, help your Miss Agnes off, and bring her in here with me." In obedience, the old man lifted me out of my saddle, and, to use his own vernacular, toted me through the slush and set me in the carryall beside Mathilde. I could not see her form, but I felt her arms wound around me, and her lips against my face, searching for those other lips that quickly met hers. And then, "I'm so overjoyed to see you, dear Agnes. It was so good of you to come," she said. "I couldn't wait. I had to order the carryall and come to meet you at the foot of the hill." We were then about a half a mile from the house. Mathilde made the boy that drove her get down and give his place on the driver's seat to Uncle Judah, and then take charge of the mules to lead them home. And so we proceeded through the snow-covered bottom toward the house. As I said, it was so dark that I could not clearly distinguish the outline of the buildings, but there appeared to be 2 houses, an old one and a new one, joined by a covered piazza and shaded by many trees. We stopped before the door of the new house, from the parlor windows of which a stream of light from the lamps within was pouring. We were met by Miss Laguerre, who gave me a cordial welcome, and took me at once to an upper front chamber, comfortably furnished, where a fine wood fire burned and a kettle of hot water stood upon the hearth for the convenience of warm ablutions. "This is your room, my dear Agnes, where I hope you will find yourself at home," said my kind hostess. I thanked her, but secretly hoped that she would leave me alone with Mathilde to hear the mystery of the haunting presence explained, for as yet we had no opportunity of a tete-a-tete. But the old lady lingered with motherly solicitude until I had washed myself and changed my traveling habit for a home dress, and then directing Jacinthe, or Jet as she was nicknamed, to restore the room to order, she invited me down into the parlor. As I left the chamber, I observed Jet's eyes start out like beads, and she made a motion to follow us, but a peremptory gesture from her mistress repelled her, and she remained, though evidently terrified at the idea of being left alone. Can it be possible, thought I, that the child is afraid to stay by herself in the new house, when of course the supernatural inmate, if there is one, must be a denizen of the old one? And at the same time, I experienced the feeling of disappointed love of adventure in being accommodated with the chamber so shining in freshness and so distant in character as well as location for what I fancied must be the scene of the mystery. When we reached the parlor, we found the party of young people collected to celebrate Christmas Eve, but scarcely were the introductions over before a servant opened the door and announced supper, and conducted by Mrs. Laguerre, we all went out by way of the hall and covered piazza to the dining room in the old house, where the feast was spread. I cannot stop to analyze the sensations with which I crossed the threshold of this mystery-haunted house and entered the faint, old-fashioned parlor where the supper table was set. The polished oak floor, the oak-paneled walls, the high, narrow, deep-set windows, and tall black walnut chimney piece over the broad fireplace, flanked by a high cupboard in one corner and a coffin-like clock in the other, all whispered of those who had lived and died there long years before. There was a well-spread and cheerfully lighted table, and a merry, youthful company assembled around it, but even these animating influences were not sufficiently powerful to exorcise the thoughts of the dead, for talkative and frolicsome though they were, their talk was still of the supernatural, of ghosts and ghosts' seers. I did not talk. I was too earnestly interested in hearing, and I listened breathlessly to learn the mystery of the house. In vain! Not a single allusion was made to a spectre in connection of Wolfbreak Lodge. They ignored the supposition. Perhaps they were really ignorant of it. Supper over and cleared away, the young people returned no more that night to the parlor in the new house, but prepared for a game of snap-apple in the old dining room, which their romping could not hurt. I was so weary with my 3 days and nights of riding, and so eager besides for a tete-a-tete with Mathilde, that I pleaded fatigue as an undeniable reason for retiring before the game should commence. I hoped that Mathilde alone would attend me. Not so. Miss Laguerre, apparently watching my withdrawal, joined her daughter and myself as we left the room, and accompanied us to the chamber set apart for my use in the new house. When we had reached this apartment, Mrs. Laguerre said, "There is no one that sleeps in this house usually. We keep these chambers principally for the use of our guests. No one will occupy any room within it tonight except yourself, unless, indeed, you feel afraid." "Afraid?" repeated I in a tone that quickly called forth an apology. "Oh, I know, my dear Agnes, that you are now no coward, but I did not know but that you might feel indisposed to sleep alone in a strange house." "What? When it is a perfectly new house, Mrs. Laguerre? If indeed it were an old-time house, I might be afraid of the traditional ghost," said I, watching in her countenance the effect of my words, and seeing her, to my astonishment, turn pale and send a quick, significant glance to Mathilde, who averted her head. "Ah," thought I, "the old house is haunted. Would they only let me sleep there, where there is some chance of being delightfully frightened? I was about to say, Agnes, that if you prefer, I will send one of the Negro women to sleep on a mattress in your room. By no means, Mrs. Laguerre. I shall fall asleep as soon as I touch my pillow and not wake until morning. So I should not be able to appreciate the benefit of Peggy or Dinah's society. Very well, my dear, as you please. Here is a bell rope at your bed's head. Its wires run into the old house. If you should want anything, ring. I smiled and assured my hostess I wanted nothing but sleep, whereupon she called Mathilde, bade me the good night, and left the room. Turning back, however, she said to me, Agnes, my dear, lock your chamber door after us. Yes, madam. Excuse me, my dear, but young people are forgetful, especially when they are tired and sleepy. I think I should like to hear you lock it, Agnes. There was something in her caution that struck me as very singular, but I laughed and went to the door, said, and after repeating my good night, as desired, shut the door in their faces and locked it. There, have you heard me lock the door? I inquired. Yes, my dear, all right. And is your mind at rest on that score? I am sure that you have attended to my advice. Good night and happy dreams. Thanks, and the same good wishes. Good night, said I in conclusion. I listened and heard them go downstairs, enter the parlor, and fasten the windows and secure the safety of the fire there, go in the back half door and bolt and bar it, and finally go out by the front door and lock it after them. Fastened up as I was in the house, I did not feel myself quite in prison. Because, should I, like Stern's Starling, want to get out, I could do so by the back door. Now, I never could account for it. But no sooner was I left alone in that room, resplendent as it was with newness, than a strange feeling of superstition came over me that I could neither understand nor escape. It was in vain that I turned my eyes from the shining white wall and freshly painted and varnished doors and windows to the cheerful pattern of the carpet and furniture drapery, and said that in this new and freshly furnished chamber the supernatural was out of place. There grew upon me the impression of an unearthly presence near, and the feeling, in spite of all probability, that this was the scene of the household mystery. This was the haunted chamber. In this new aspect, I examined it. It was the least like one that could be imagined. It was a lofty, spacious, cheerful, double-bedded room, with 4 large windows, 2 on the east and 2 on the west side, with a fireplace in the south wall, and the heads of the beds at some distance apart against the north wall. Between the 2 east windows was a pretty dressing table in glass. Between the west windows was a washstand with a china service. On each side of the fireplace were 2 spacious clothes closets. Before the fire sat 2 easy chairs. In intermediate spaces around the walls were half a dozen other chairs. I examined the clothes closets and found them entirely empty, and at the service of my dresser. Then I looked under the bed, then beneath the drapery of the dressing table, and finding nothing that should not be there, undressed myself, said my prayers, blew out my candle, and went to bed. I could not sleep. My mind, my nerves had for some reason become unusually excited, and despite of extreme fatigue, I lay awake. I thought the room was too light, for, though the candle was extinguished, a glowing fire burned upon the hearth, a few yards from the foot of my bed, and the light of the now risen moon streamed into the east windows. After turning from side to side, vainly wooing slumber, I arose and went to close the east front windows. As I reached them with this purpose, I stayed my hand a moment while I looked out at the snow-clad, moonlit mountain landscape. Below me was the bottom, bounded not many furlongs off by the cedar-grown precipice, down which that very evening I had come. Under the shelter of the mountain, straight in the line of my vision, lay the family graveyard of the former owner. In a copse of evergreens where the spectral-looking tombstones gleamed whitely among the dark firs and cedars. Meditating upon these departed, I closed the blinds of the front windows and then went to the back ones. The latter looked straight down into the uncurtained windows of the lightened dining room where the young people were still at play. Above these windows and directly opposite to mine were those of Mrs. Laguerre's bedroom, now dimly lighted from the fire within. With this proximity of the family, I felt less lonely, closed my blinds, and returned to bed. Still, I could not sleep. The fire on the hearth beyond my bed's foot flickered up and down, casting tall, spectral shadows that danced upon the walls, or stretched their long arms over the ceiling. For hours I lay watching the phantasmagoria until the fire died down and the tall, dancing shadows sank into a mass of darkness before sleep came to my wearied senses. But scarcely had I closed my eyes upon the natural world before a strange vision, or dream, if you prefer to call it so, passed before me. Methought I heard the click of a turning key. I opened my eyes and saw the door slowly swing back upon its hinges, and a lady of dark, majestic beauty, dressed in deep mourning and having a pale and careworn face, entered the chamber. Slowly and silently she walked to and fro, her footfall waking no echo, her progress attended by no sound, save the slight rustle of her silken robe. I was magnetized to watch her, as with clasped hands and wide-open, mournful eyes, she walked in silent, measured steps up and down the room. At length she paused in the middle of the floor, fixed her eyes upon mine, with a wild and mournful gaze, slowly raised one hand from the breast upon which both had been tightly clasped, and, with her spectral finger extended downward, pointed to the spot beneath her feet, and then as slowly resumed her former attitude and passed with measured steps from the room. I tried to speak to her, to question her, but failed to utter a sound. In an agony of distress, I tried to call out, and in the effort to do so, awoke to find that I had been dreaming. But, reader, the door that I had locked so carefully the night before was standing wide open, as when the dark woman of my dream had passed through it. Day was dawning. I shivered both from superstitious excitement and from the cool draught of air blowing upon me from the open door. I drew the cover closely around me and listened, but no sounds except the undefined, low, pleasant murmur of awakening nature, the soft rustle of the pine in the upspringing morning breeze, the flutter of the night birds waking up in their branches, and the detonation echo of distant, louder noises were heard. I arose softly and opened the east window blinds, and then went back to bed to lie and watch the crimson light of morning kindling up the orient. An hour I lay thus, watching the dawn growing brighter and brighter, into the perfect day. And then I heard a key turned in the hall door, and someone come in and ascend the stairs. It was the little black maid Jet come to make my fire. As she entered, I saw her eyes grow wild, and she inquired, "Miss Agnes, is yer been up, miss, to open this yer door?" "I have been up this morning, Jet," said I, not wishing to let her into my full confidence. The answer seemed to set her at rest, for her countenance lost its wild terror, and she proceeded with cheerful alacrity to light the fire, fill the ewers, and so forth. Before she had got through with her task, there was a rush of many feet into the hall and up the stairs, and Mathilde and such of her young friends as were already up and dressed bounded into the room, exclaiming, a Merry Christmas, Agnes." Their arrival was enough to put to flight all the supernatural visitants that Hades ever sent forth, or is that visitants? Sorry. Pardon. Their arrival was enough to put to flight all the supernatural visitants that Hades ever sent forth. They hurried me with my toilet. They worried me to come down and see the Christmas tree and get some eggnog. I was carried away with their gay excitement and almost forgot my mysterious dream or visitant, but not quite. But all through the morning, greetings of the family, the eggnog drinking, the visit to the Christmas tree, the distribution of presents, the merry breakfast, the arrival of invited guests, the Christmas dinner party, the afternoon sports, and the evening dance, I was possessed with the haunting presence of that dark, handsome woman and her majestic woe. And I will stop on that part and continue tomorrow. Goodbye, bruv.